I'm Bruce Kulick, and welcome to Kulick's Hot Licks. I'll be spending the next hour with you guitar players showing you some of the techniques that I've used on the Kiss Asylum album and tour, and what I was just playing for you before. Using these techniques of finger tapping and harmonic dive bombs and hammer-ons and string bendings, you can create many riffs and develop a whole style that will, I think, will very much impress your neighbors and friends and maybe get you kicked out of the neighborhood, who knows. So I'll break down each riff into little sections so that we can really examine them carefully. I'll show you the theory behind each one, and hopefully you'll really understand it. Because we're doing a video, you'll be able to rewind the tape to look back at anything just in case you're not quite sure what's happening. So first, let's tune up the guitar to my E. Here's my A, my D, my G, my B, and my high E. This is really also another example of how the guitar can sound like a human voice, like wailing. Of course, the record, I'm following a drum pattern that's quick, so it's just going to be. And the answer riff to that will be. Now, in this one, we do, again, a half-step bend. Then switch to the G string with a vibrato on the 12th fret. Let me take a moment to look at my vibrato technique. I like to, I kind of keep my hand in an older blues traditional. I only move the thumb to the back when I need to, the back of the neck. So generally, my thumb is around the neck comfortably like this. So when I need to give a note, a nice, excuse me, a nice, like, singing tone, I'll be able to shake the first finger like that. And it gives it a nice, like a vocal quality to it. That sets us up for the next part of the riff, which is similar to the first, again using the pentatonic scale. Except this time we end on the G string with a bend down. Now this is interesting because one strike of the pick, and we get an A, and then we get the G. Or rather, it really starts with a G. And again, I give it a vibrato. So let's look over how we connect them together. And then, of course, at the end, the dive bomb. Let's just take a look at a second how I like to hold a pick, because some of you players might have realized that it's a little unorthodox. Generally, people play with just the thumb and the index finger. I like to use the first two fingers and the thumb. For some reason, I'm just able to dig into the guitar better that way. But it's really something that everyone has to explore and see what they're going to feel comfortable with. So I'm able to dig in well with this, and it hasn't been a problem for me at all. So I just wanted to overview that I'm able to really dig in by holding it this way. So let's take a look at the riff one more time, just in review, that we're starting with a pentatonic type scale, except it's an unusual position. We're moving across the strings to get those triplet hammer-ons. And then we're going to bend up. This finger's unsupported, up a whole step. Then into these bluesy phrases, kind of like, and then we answer that to the G with a vibrato, back to the pentatonic scale, then the G down to an A, back to the 12th fret, and then to a dive bomb. Now this dive bomb, I like to use the fourth finger to get a harmonic. The dive bomb happens because of courtesy of our tremolo arm, in this case a Floyd Rose. So it's important on a harmonic to make sure that your finger is directly above the fret. Otherwise you'll get a dead note like that. So there you have it. That's our first riff. So while we're talking about dive bombs, let's start looking at some of the harmonics that we can use on the guitar that are kind of common, though some are not so common. We'll get to some of those in a second. But let's first look at the ones on the G string. The G string is the thickest of the unwound strings, so that gives us always a very nice, strong tone. So here's the first one that I like to use, is of course on the 12th fret, which is the one we just used, the G note. On the 9th fret, we get a B note. On the 7th fret, we get a D. On the 5th fret, another B. Is that right? No. Okay. There we get a G also. It's just an octave higher. See, us pros don't remember things either. The next note is the B, the 4th fret. Except this one's off. Okay, so that's MBC, right? Anyway, by using the tremolo arm, we can drop these down at any point. You notice each one has a character of its own. And that's up for you to decide where to put them. I like to put dive bombs in between my solos because it's kind of a pause, a musical pause. Like, so remember that it's another technique to use that will kind of, it's almost like a period at the end of some statement in your solo. Now let's look at the two unusual ones that I have for you. This one is on the 2nd fret of the G string, and it looks like you're playing an A. It's above the 2nd fret. But what really happens here is we get two notes that are happening at once. We're getting a G and an A at the same time, which is unusual, but it has to do with how we're cutting the string down. And as we drop this one down with the dive bomb technique, we really get a wild effect because the harmonics are just like beating against each other in some odd way that really, especially through a distorted amp, give you a real interesting sound. There's like a lower note and a higher note. The next one I used on I'm Alive on the Kiss album, and it's on the low E string. And I'll play the section where it comes in. Now this one happens again on the 2nd fret over the F sharp. And we're getting an E and an F sharp at the same time here. So as you drop it down, it really gives a growl that sounds like something unearthly. So once again, in review, the G string's great. Explore the D and the A. There's harmonics everywhere on the guitar, obviously, if you've ever tuned up with that technique. But the G string seems to be a very strong one. And then we have the low one. Now I'd like to show you some tapping techniques that I've used on the Asylum album and tour that are very exciting. These can give you some really wild sounds, and you can use them really to express any kind of musical lines. I'll show you one thing that I used during my solo on the Asylum tour. It went like this. Now this riff actually outlines many chords, and we'll talk about the chords for a second just to show you how you can make up your own. Because the classical players that have been using the tap techniques really are able to use, you can use a Beethoven or a Bach song and just go with it on the guitar. So first we have an A minor chord, and then an E major, and then I'm going to a dominant chord, a C7 chord, to a D with the ninth on top. Then I go to another dominant chord, the B flat, to a C with the ninth on top, down to the root, up to a D chord, to an E major. And that's where I do that long segment. That's the riff I'd like to get into. But before we talk about the tapping techniques that I used in this, let's just look at the right hand for a second. Now when you're riffing on the guitar, you're holding the pick the way you feel comfortable with it. I told you I like to use the first two fingers with the thumb. But then when I switch for a tap, what I'll do is neatly tuck the pick into my second finger, like this, to leave all the others free, like this. So I'm going like this to that, so that I can go back to it, the pick's right there, as soon as I come out of my tapping section. Now it's very important how you hold your hand on the guitar, because suddenly you're away from this whole area with your right hand, and you're suddenly on top of the fingerboard. So what I do is use the thumb on the left side of the fingerboard, and my third and fourth fingers on the other side, on the treble side of the fingerboard, and I'll support my hand this way, which leaves the tapping finger, that first index finger, free. So you get the idea that this is, holding your hand this way will really kind of define where you can tap. Because it's important, later I'll show you how we're going to be crossing the strings. And if you don't have a firm grip with that right hand, you're going to run into some problems if you're just doing this. So I really recommend grabbing onto the guitar this way. So let's first outline that riff, which happens over the E chord. And I'll be talking about this riff in particular. Now this riff outlines the E major chord in this position. Charge, right? So watch. We start really with the third, the major third, to the fourth, to the fifth. Now the riff starts on the B string, okay? Now to start the riff, I'm going to actually stroke with my right hand like this. So on the 17th fret, over the E note, where we'll eventually tap, I'm actually plucking the string. And then I'm hammering on with the second and the fourth finger. You can use the third if you care to for the B note, but I prefer the fourth. So there's our four-note phrase. And once you're comfortable with that, and it's nice to be able to give it a nice vibrato like that, start doing it over and over. Now note that I'm using what I go up with, down. So I'm actually ascending and then descending on the same riff. Once again, slowly. You start by stroking the string to get the major third, hammer on to the fourth, to the fifth, to the tap on the 17th fret. And that kind of riff could be used anywhere, like Eddie Van Halen likes to use it. That kind of approach. So let's next look at how we'll cross the strings to get the rest of the riff. The other notes of the riff include the major third on the high part, on the high string. The major third, the fifth, and then the major sixth. So it's really like an E6 chord almost, which is a little pretty for hard rock, but it actually, I think it's very effective. So again, here we're just using the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the root. And here we're going to go to third, on top, to the fifth, to the sixth. And that's all the notes that occur on the high E string. So what you'll have to practice on the E string is this. Now this starts with a tap on the major third on the E string. So whereas here we stroke, and here we'll have to tap. We start off tapping on the high string. So let's cross back over to the B string, because this riff will actually go from the B to the E, back to the B, down to the G string, and then back to the B string. It's a long one, but bear with me. So coming off of the E string, we'll go, which is the same riff that we did, except only the descending part of it. And now we have to learn how to go to the G string. The G is going to start on the E over here, which is the root, to the ninth, to the major third, to the fifth on top. That kind of sounds like something when you're waking up in the morning, they show you the sun rising, right? Okay, so after that, we have to play up and down in the same way. Now let's go in sequence. Once again, let's just do it in slow motion. It's really hard to play it slow in time because of the fact that there are a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Let's just review it one more time. We stroke on the B string to start it, and we're outlining this chord. And on top, in a sense, we have this chord when you cross the strings. So the first string 4 times. Then we switch over to the high E string with a tap instead of a stroke. Back to the B string. And then we stroke on the G string. Just started on the E, but we hit the B up here to do that, and then wind up on this note, which we should give a nice vibrato, either with the finger or with the arm, which is another good use of the tremolo arm. So again, this riff really combines all different types of tappings and string crossings. And it can make a real exciting effect. It actually came from Who Wants to Be Lonely from the record. I'll show you how it went there, because you could play it in any key. I start right on that C. All right, so you get the idea how you can use it and where it came from, actually. All right, now I'd like to get into another tapping riff that I used on King of the Mountain. This one crosses the strings in a similar manner, except maybe easier, because it actually goes across the neck, straight from the D to the G to the B and the E. And it uses the A minor pentatonic scale, the minor blues scale. So let's take a look at, first I'll play you the riff and show you how it goes. It goes over these chords. And it's like this. Okay, so let's take a look at that slow. What's happening is the A minor pentatonic. I'm using that part in the left hand. And in the right hand, I'm going to wind up using a suspended type of chord. It's really an A minor sus4 chord. Here's the sus4. Here's the 7th, the G. The C is the minor 3rd. And the 5th is the E. Then I extend the riff above that. But let's first look at how the left hand performs. So the left hand is using these hammer-ons between the functions of an A minor pentatonic scale. Remember that you can start the scale on the flat 7th beneath it. Which is your common use of this. So what I'm doing is that hammer-on the D with a tap on top, but we'll get to that right after. So I'm going between the flat 7th and the root on the D. On the G string, I'm using the minor 3rd and the 4th. Then to the 5th on the B string. To the flat 7th. And then to the root on the high E. To the flat 3rd. Which is an exercise you can use too. Now let's look at the right hand. I'm going to be tapping on the 12th fret, the D note, the G note, the C, and then the E. Let's just take the riff up to that spot. Quickly, it will be played like this. Now let's get into that a little slower so we can really understand it. So first I start all this with a tap. All these string crossings are actually going to be tapped. I'm not stroking it like in the earlier tapping technique. It's important that the rhythm and that the tap happens at the same time that you want your pull-offs to happen in the left hand. Watch carefully. In this case, the rhythm is like a doubling up here. And then I can continue with the same thing right across the string. Okay? So let's take a look at how I extend the riff on top. When I get to the E string, remember that the minor pentatonic blues scale, you can put in the minor 6th if you want. And that's what I do when I go up using the F. First I go up to the G, which is the flat 7th. And here's our F, the flat 6th. So that's how I extend it up on top. And in other words, it goes like this. So let's play it again slow. And in tempo, which makes it a lot easier because of the, when you're tapping and hammer-ons, the rhythm helps when you're really up to tempo. But just keep working at it. If you take it in sections like just the G and the D string, and first do it slow. Until you can work it up to. Okay? So let's try it one more time. We're tapping across the string, actually making a melody on top, and on the bottom, what we're doing is an A minor pentatonic. And staying on the E. So the... and wind up anywhere, we can actually just go. So here we go again in slow. And up to tempo. Now I'd like to show you some exercises that you can do with your hands to really get your hand to stretch out, really, so you can get these wide intervals on the guitar. And you can always sneak these into your solos later on, which I did in Tears Are Falling. So let's first get into the exercise, and then I'll show you how it occurs into the solo. If you stretch between the 7th fret and the 12th frets across the fingerboard, I used harmonics there, but let's fret them all now. That's a real good exercise for your hand. Now, when I do these kind of stretches, I like to bring my hand around the way players who use a classical-oriented approach do, so that my thumb is directly behind the neck, and what I'm able to do is really be able to stretch my hand across. So from this, you can jump across the guitar any way you like. Sounds kind of oriental or very, very Eastern. Now, it occurs in the Tears Are Falling solo like this. And I'll show you how the solo goes. So you see how, after this phrase, I was able to go and then turn it into a regular minor pentatonic. Actually, in this case, it's Dorian. And then I go up on top, which is another interesting jump, because it's an octave. Here I'm using the A, the D, to the A. So remember, explore all these wide hand positions, because you really can get some open sounds on the guitar. In the same way that it's like tapping, because when you tap, you're adding an additional note on top of already some spans like we just did before. So we can add that on top of these too. They're using a half step, which gave it a kind of interesting feel. Another riff that I like that also stretches your handle out came from All Night on the Kiss album. And this one, the song's in G, so I start the solo off of the G note, but instead of just, you know, playing it in this kind of position, which is a nice riff, by the way, but in this way, I'm able to use the lick stretched out across the E string. So I use my fourth finger. I don't bring my hand around, the thumb around on this riff. I prefer to play it more traditionally. But I'm really like angling my hand, and it's a big stretch for the pinky. So I play the G, which is the root in this song, to an F, the flat 7, to a D. And you notice I've been supporting the pinky in this riff with the third finger because, let's face it, it's little, you know, and it needs the help sometimes. So don't be afraid of sometimes playing, you know, chords or any of these kind of riffs with a supporting finger that looks like your hand's twisted. It really doesn't matter. As long as you can get the support from another finger, use it. And then once again, like a Dorian. In this case, in G. And then I do the same pattern, except on the B string. Excuse me, with this stretch, it's just one shorter to facilitate the minor third. So the whole riff. And then at that ending phrase, I switch across to the high E string. Alright, so you get the idea of how you can use these long stretches on the guitar to create riffs that encompass a wide, you know, within the octave, wide intervals. And in this case, and you can add taps on top of these things, like this. This last riff I'm going to show you is in the style of Eddie Van Halen that I used on King of the Mountain solo. That's how I kind of end the solo. So let me play the rhythm part. It uses a lot of tapping, and it crosses the strings, uses all the techniques that I showed you before about tapping, but this one's a little closer together, and it's also rather quick. So let me play the rhythm before that goes under the solo, and then I'll go into it. So this one starts on the B string, goes to the G string, to the D, and then winds up on the A string. So let's take a look at the functions and how it's built from what chords. In the left hand, it's really based on an A chord, even though it's going through, it sounds as if it's going through a whole series of chords. It sounds very modal, in fact, if you know anything about modes. But let's just look at the notes that are involved. So on the bottom, on the left hand is, that's our starting note here. Then we have an E note, which is the 5th. Then we have the 9th, the B. And then we have the A on the A string, on the 12th fret. Which is like a nice, it's like a nice 9 chord. So that's in the left hand. On top, we're making almost like a C6-9 chord. Is what we're going to wind up tapping on. So let's go through each string and show you how we arrive at the riff. Again, I'm using these techniques where I'm stroking and tapping at the same time. So that's how we start that note. So we start the A on the B string, we go to a 9th. the B, to the minor third, to the fourth, which is the note that's being tapped. Which isn't much different from this one, which we looked at earlier. So they're all similar. That's why you really have to explore all of these. So once again, on the B string, we descend and then we ascend. We ascend and then we descend back and forth. Then we change over to the G string. So let's look at the riff on the G string. Here we use the E note, which is the fifth in the key of A, to the minor sixth. So remember that we're kind of using a minor sixth scale here. To the flat seventh, to the A, which is on our 14th fret. When we go to the G string, we'll actually start with the high note. In slow motion, those two strings. And now we go to the D string. So on the D, we start on the B note, to a C, to a D on the 12th fret. We tap on our E, the 14th fret. Once again, we stroke and start the rhythm happening. Then tap, and descend back on that string. And then we go over to the A string for the ending. Now here I'm using a major sixth, at least in the key of A. But since this riff seems to go through like modal sounds, it really doesn't matter that we have a minor sixth on one string and a major sixth on the other. So just be aware that you can mix those up. It really won't matter. So we start on the F sharp, to the G, to the A, to the C, which we tap on the 15th fret. So let's look at the riff again. At the very end, I added in this riff, which is a more typical tap hammer-on. The A to the minor third, the C above. So watch again how your string change across. Again, we go from the B, the G, the D to the A, straight across the fingerboard. With a little phrase at the end. So in full tempo, once again, it's nice to end it with a nice dive bomb on the A string. So again, just realize that you're playing over those that chord on the left hand with the notes above it. And in the right hand, you're going to be making like a C6-9 chord and tapping these notes. And once again in full tempo. All right, now I'd like to summarize all the techniques that we just went over. Like the first one, the pentatonic scale. Just remember that any scale that you know, you could find another place on the fingerboard to play it. You know, we were up here, which is kind of strange, but by the way, I also on the record did it low. So you can listen carefully to that. You get a great sound if you double track on your, even on your home machines. So remember, on any riff like that, just move it. Find another position for it on the guitar. It's there. Sometimes the string changing makes it difficult because, you know, the B is tuned differently. You know, the guitar isn't in perfect fourths. But, you know, just work at it and you'll find the other positions for the same scale. And then we did some bluesy riffs in that first riff from King of the Mountain. And these are great because you could just, you know, anytime you can make the guitar sound lyrical, make it sing. you're really doing a lot for your playing. I think it's real important for guitarists to think of their instrument not as a guitar, but more like they can sing exactly what they're going to play. That's the most important thing. And then vibrato. It's just really, really important to make sure you get some, feeling into it. And give it smooth. It should always be up and down, smooth. And even if you want to get really fast with it, just make sure that it's smooth. That you're not, you're not going too far sharp or too far flat. And better a little sharp than flat anyway. The blues are really important in all those kind of riffs. Anytime you're bending half steps, that's the blues, because you're actually getting these very minute quarter tones, right between the two notes. They're always in there. Then the next riff that we were looking at were all those dive bombs, and again, they're great even on open strings. And of course the fretted G string one, which sounds wild, and then that low one. So explore, find others, because they're all over the fingerboard. They're also repeated up here too. So just because you're up here doesn't mean, if you're playing, you can play the ones up here. You don't have to use the positions down here. They repeat the same way up on top. It's just the frets are wider on the bottom of the neck, so it might be a little easier to get to. All right, and then we got into some tapping things, which I know we did 3 different riffs with the taps, and this is a whole realm of guitar playing that is just begun to be explored. There's people playing with 2 hands independently, without even thinking of using a pick also. It's just use your imagination and go for it. So remember that you can always stick it in. It's like your 4th finger, a tap. You just keep going up the guitar with it, all right? So remember on that riff that we were looking at, I took a real progression, like Hotel California almost, and just kept dropping it. So try to play it with a real legato approach and make it feel, make it really sing. Every time you approach these kind of riffs, just make the guitar really become lyrical, because especially these hammer-ons can really give a singing tone without ever using a pick. Or like the one that sounds like waking up in the morning, So I hope you guitar players have learned some of these techniques. You got the tape, go over it. You can go back to it a year from now. It doesn't really matter. And we're gonna close this thing with a little blues progression where I'm just gonna wail out, because that's where it comes from me, the blues. So here we go. By the way, I'll see you on tour next year, and listen for me on the records. All right?